He arrived at the same time every night, not earlier to avoid the crowds, not later to disappear into them, always at that quiet middle point when most people were already too tired to really notice anyone else around them. The digital clock always displayed the same number when he passed through the turnstiles. The security guard didn't even look twice anymore. The departure boards still showed a few scheduled times. But in that window of time, almost everything ran on automatic routine. He walked slowly, not because of weakness or age catching up with him, but out of habit, like someone who knows every single step of their own path and no longer feels the need to rush toward the destination. He always chose the same bench, the second to last one, near the gray concrete pillar. In front of him, the yellow line that marked the edge of the platform. Above, a cold fluorescent light that sometimes flickered slightly before stabilizing again. Before sitting down, he always performed the same small ritual. He would look at the bench, run his hand lightly across it as if brushing away some invisible dust, and only then would he settle down. Back straight, feet aligned, breathing calm and steady. In his hands, the small red box. It never failed to appear. It never changed color or shape. It was never replaced by something else, no matter the temperature outside, the day of the week, or how busy the station was. The red box was always there, nestled between his palms like something that could never be forgotten. It wasn't large. It would fit entirely in the hand of someone younger. It had a simple ribbon, neatly tied, that marked a precise X over the lid. There were no store marks on it, no logo or brand name. It was just red, vivid, silent, perfectly kept. He held it with such delicacy, never squeezing it, never shaking it. Resting at the base of his fingers, it seemed lighter than it actually was, as if somewhere deep inside him there lived a fear of hurting whatever was contained within those walls. The station, at that hour, had a loneliness all its own. The speakers announced trains in an almost automatic fashion. Words repeated so many times throughout the day that they seemed to arrive on their own now. A broom scraped the floor in wide, sweeping cycles. A cleaning cart rolled past, pushed with the same care as always. Sometimes someone would cross through in a hurry, backpack on their shoulders, earphones blocking out the world. They didn't always notice the man. When they did, their gaze would slip away quickly. They recognized the figure, but not the story behind it. He had become part of the scenery. Slowly, over time, the ritual stopped being a coincidence. It became a presence. Anyone who worked there every night, sooner or later, began to notice. One of them was the night shift worker. He arrived before the last wave of passengers and only left when the gates were nearly empty. He knew which light burned out from time to time. He knew which ticket machine made a strange sound when it printed. He knew in which part of the corridor the echo of footsteps seemed louder than anywhere else. He also knew that the old man was always sitting on the second to last bench. In the first week, he didn't really pay attention. He registered the image the way you register a poster on the wall. It's there, but it doesn't demand reflection or deeper thought. In the second week, he began to notice small repetitions. Same time, same bench, same posture. In the third week, he noticed the red box, not because it was flashy or demanding attention, but because the man seemed to organize everything around him in relation to it. When he adjusted his coat, it was to avoid covering the box. When he crossed his arms, he left just enough space to keep it free and visible. When someone passed too close, he would pull it slightly closer to his chest, as if it were pure instinct. The worker was an ordinary man. Deep circles under his eyes, heavy steps at the start of his shift, even heavier by the end. He knew how to deal with machines, tickets, doors, and lights. He didn't really know what to do with other people's silences. Even so, he kept watching. He never saw the old man ask for help, never saw him stand up to approach anyone. There were no signs in his hands, no improvised placards, no written words asking for anything at all. On the contrary, when someone almost bumped into him, it was the man who said, "Sorry," always the first to ask for permission, always the first to adjust himself, even when there was no need. One night, while checking the trash bins on the platform, the worker heard his voice for the first time. It wasn't a long sentence. It wasn't a speech. "Good evening." It had been directed at him. The worker took a second to understand that the greeting was meant for him. He was so used to being background scenery that it felt strange to be brought into focus. He responded in the same tone, "Good evening." That was it. No continuation. Neither of them tried to start a conversation. It was as if that simple "good evening" was enough for now. The following night, the ritual repeated itself. Same time, same bench, same red box. "Good evening." "Good evening." A simple exchange, almost mechanical. But there, something small was beginning to shift. The worker began to notice more details that had previously escaped his attention. He noticed that, before sitting down, the man would look up at the schedule board even when there were no more trains announced for that direction. It was as if he was checking something that never changed, a silent confirmation that, yes, this was the right place. This was where he needed to be. He noticed that from time to time, the man would open his hand slightly, stretching his fingers, and then return to holding the box again, as if relieving a weight that wasn't physical. He also noticed that the lid, though it appeared secure, had a small sign of wear near the edge, as if it had been opened and closed many times before. Never there, though. There it remained untouched, intact. The worker had a habit of wiping down the stair railing with a damp cloth at the end of each night. It was a task that didn't require thought. While he did it, his mind would wander. One of those times he looked toward the bench and found himself thinking, how long has he been coming here? He didn't know the answer. He had the feeling that the old man had been there since before he started on this shift. Maybe that was an exaggeration. Maybe it wasn't. Some colleagues had a ready-made explanation for everything that escaped their understanding. Some people just don't want to go back home. Some people like to take up public space. He didn't feel comfortable with those explanations. The phrases sounded too easy. They didn't match the respectful way the man held that red box. On a rainy night, the old man arrived with his shoulders slightly wet. The coat, dark in color, held the marks of the rain. The box, however, was completely dry. He had carried it protected under his arm, wrapped in a transparent plastic bag. He sat down as usual. He carefully removed the box from the bag. He smoothed out the crumpled plastic. He folded it calmly and tucked it into his pocket. Only then did he rest the box in his hands, as if returning something to its exact place. The worker observed from a distance he was holding a mop. He pretended to be checking a puddle of water near the stairs. In reality, he was counting how many times the old man ran his thumb over the side of the box. It wasn't the curiosity of someone who wants to uncover mysteries. It was the curiosity of someone who realizes that something important is happening there and doesn't want to treat it as just scenery. For a long time, nothing changed. Some nights, the man arrived a little more hunched over. On others, he seemed almost lighter. But the ritual remained the same. Same bench, same time, same red object. The worker continued just watching and being seen a little in that daily good evening. One day, however, there was a different detail, small, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying attention. When he sat down, the old man tilted the box slightly to the side, as he always did. But this time, it slipped a centimeter further than usual. It didn't fall. It didn't open. But the ribbon shifted slightly out of place. It was a minimal slip. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. But the worker saw, maybe because he was closer that time. Maybe because, by that point, he knew the outline of that ribbon almost as well as the man who arranged it every single night. The old man noticed the misalignment a second later. He took a deep breath. With delicacy, he tried to pull the tip of the ribbon back into place. His fingers, however, didn't obey with the same precision as they had years ago. The ribbon gave a little, but it didn't look the way it had before. He didn't complain. He didn't sigh loudly. He just observed in silence the small difference. The worker felt something simple rise inside him. The desire to help. It wasn't a desire to know what was inside the box, nor to open up a deep conversation. It was just the desire to restore to that ritual the symmetry it seemed to demand. He spent the rest of his rounds thinking about whether he should do something. He didn't want to invade the man's space. He didn't want to treat him as someone incapable. He didn't want to diminish the dignity of that waiting. The next night, he carried in his pocket, along with his keys, a small piece of transparent tape that he usually used when a notice came loose from the wall. He didn't plan anything specific. He just brought it, just in case. The ritual repeated itself as always. Arrival, bench, box. Good evening. Good evening. It was only after finishing his usual routines that he walked without hurry toward the second to last bench. He stopped at a respectful distance, not so close that it seemed rushed, not so far that it seemed disinterested. "May I sit here for a moment?" he asked. It was the first time he hadn't remained standing. The old man made a short gesture with his head, a silent, of course, accompanied by a small space he opened between his body and the edge of the bench. The worker sat down. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The sound of the station filled the space for them, a more distant announcement, the squeak of brakes, the dragging of a suitcase on tired wheels. The red box remained resting in the old man's hands. Up close, the misaligned ribbon was even more visible. The worker didn't look directly at it, but he saw it. "The ribbon," he began, almost regretting it halfway through the sentence. "May I help fix it a little?" A simple question, open-ended, no obligation attached to it. The old man lowered his eyes to the box. His eyes returned to the worker. There was a brief pause, as if he were weighing the importance of that request. Then he tilted the object toward him. Not much, just enough to offer it. "If it's not too much trouble," he murmured. It wasn't. Carefully, the worker took the small piece of tape from his pocket. He used his own hand as support to lift the loose end of the ribbon, without pulling it with force. He repositioned the ribbon back to its original place, following the mark of the old crease. His movements were slow, attentive, like someone handling an object they don't know, but recognize as important to someone else. When he finished, he lightly ran his finger over the surface, checking that everything was secure. He didn't invent anything new. He just returned what already existed, the way it should be. "Better now?" he asked, returning the box. The man looked at the gift with calm seriousness. He took a while to respond, as if it were necessary to check not only the ribbon, but what that care actually meant. "Yes," he finally said. "Yes, it is." Silence again. This time, however, it wasn't the silence of people who don't know how to fill the space. It was the silence of those who allow what just happened to settle in. The worker didn't ask anything yet. He felt the urge to know how many nights, for whom, why. But something inside him knew that if those answers were meant to appear, they would come out on their own. They didn't need to be forced. It was the old man himself who broke the silence. "I used to bring flowers," he commented, as if continuing a conversation already started before. It wasn't a dramatic statement. It was just an observation. "But they got tired faster than I did." He paused. "The box lasts longer," he added. The worker turned his face slowly, paying attention. "Is it for someone specific?" he asked without pushing. The man nodded. Then he added, "It always was." His hand slid slightly along the side of the box, as if remembering an old gesture that had been repeated countless times before. "We used to meet here," he said, "not always at the same time, but always here." There was no theatrical sadness in his voice. There was memory, a memory that had weight and depth, but didn't ask for applause or recognition. One day, she stopped coming? The question came out simple, without dramatization. The old man didn't answer right away. He looked toward the dark tunnel from where, from time to time, the light of an approaching train would emerge from another platform. He seemed to be listening to things that were no longer there. "Life changed tracks," he replied, choosing his words slowly. "Hers, mine. What remained was the place." The sentence didn't explain everything, but it explained enough. The red box wasn't a reminder of what was missing. It was a reminder of what once existed, of something that had been real enough to deserve a ritual like this. "Why keep coming?" the worker asked carefully. There were many possible answers. He chose the simplest one. "Because if I stop, it just becomes longing," the man said. "This way, it's still a meeting, even if it's just mine." He didn't ask for that to make sense to anyone else. It was an agreement between him and time itself. The worker understood what he could understand. He didn't try to correct anything. He didn't offer advice. He didn't promise that everything would be okay. He just stayed sitting there. Feeling useful in that moment wasn't about fixing the other person's past. It was about sharing the present without taking anything away from it. The board announced the approach of a late train. The glow of the lights cut shadows across the floor. The wind pushed a forgotten piece of paper until it stopped near the bench. The old man adjusted his body. His eyes, for an instant, shone the way they do on days when you're expecting someone. Maybe he was still waiting. Maybe he knew somewhere deep down that this meeting wouldn't happen anymore. But he kept coming because some acts of waiting are by themselves a form of love. When the train pulled up, the doors opened with the same metallic sound as always. Few people entered, few exited. The man didn't stand up immediately. He waited a little longer, as if checking one more time whether this night was different from all the others. It wasn't, but there was something new. Even so, he wasn't alone on the bench anymore. "Are you taking this one?" the worker asked, without rushing, without demanding. "I don't think so tonight," the old man replied. "Tonight I just stay until it leaves." And that's what they did. They sat together while the train waited, while the doors closed, while the train began to move away. When the last car disappeared into the tunnel, the old man took a deep breath. He squeezed the box a little tighter, then he relaxed his fingers. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he asked. It wasn't a question about official schedules. It was something else. "I will," the worker answered. "I've been staying." The man nodded. "Then I think I will too," he said. They didn't promise anything beyond that. One night at a time. Before leaving, near the time when the station finally allowed itself to become truly empty, the old man stood up with his usual calm. He straightened his coat. He adjusted the box between his hands. He looked once at the worker, not like someone saying goodbye forever, but like someone recognizing a familiar face on the way back. "Thank you," he said, "not for the ribbon." The worker didn't ask, then for what? He didn't need to. He knew. "Good evening," he simply replied. He watched the man walk toward the exit. His footsteps disappeared among the columns and reflections on the floor. His presence, however, didn't completely vanish. A space remained, a bench that suddenly was no longer just furniture, a fixed point in a night that kept changing. Sometime later, another train arrived. Other people passed by. The mop returned to sweep the floor. The cloth returned to clean the railing. To the eyes of someone arriving for the first time, nothing there had a story. But for those who had seen the ritual up close, the station now held a new record. A man who insisted on transforming memory into gesture, and another who, tired but attentive, decided to accompany that insistence instead of pushing it away. The next night, the worker looked at the clock again when the board marked that familiar time. The second to last bench was not empty, neither was the red box. He smiled to himself, almost imperceptibly. A smile from someone who didn't save anyone but allowed himself to see. Some waits continue, some absences don't change. But sometimes, what changes is who you go through that interval with. Rescue isn't always about taking someone out of a place. Sometimes, rescue is sitting beside them and choosing to stay.